Hello, everybody. We're about ready to begin. Thank you for joining us live. This is very much an experiment into this, so do bear with me if you're watching on YouTube. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to go. This is very much an experiment into. Let me know in the chats if you are watching on YouTube or if you are watching on Facebook or how your preferred method of watching is. There's going to be a few topics we're covering on the show today. We're just about ready to begin, just getting a few more things set up. Still deciding out of all the different things I want to cover today, which one I want to do first. Yes. I still am on the placeholder screen for a reason. Yeah. The show is about to begin. I haven't officially begun it yet. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jessica. Yeah, I'm watching. This is pretty interesting. So there is a stream chat that I can see where both YouTubers and Facebookers can comment, and I can tell which places the comments are coming from. So that's pretty cool. I'm actually looking a bit forward to this. I mean, I always look forward to this. That isn't unique this time. But, you know, sometimes I'm nervous to try new things. This is exciting so far. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Rough Report. This is Jimmy Ruffian talking at you from downtown Toronto, broadcasting live for the first time on YouTube. So hopefully we'll get to do this a little bit more. Also simulcasting over to Facebook. And yeah, onward and upward to new things. I always consider the show in a perpetual basis of being in some sort of beta test. I'm not a professional television broadcaster. I haven't been trained at this. It's just something I wanted to do, and hopefully I get better at it as I do it. And so here's to getting some new viewers. It's not like there's a lack of this kind of content out there on the internet already. You know, you're sort of leftist, communist-leaning, talking into a microphone guy. I don't think I'm particularly unique in that regard, but I do think I might have some interesting things to offer you. And so here's to exploring that. Just to sort of give a little bit of an introduction, I guess, for those who don't typically watch the show, and I feel like that's necessary, being that we're on YouTube for the first time. Yeah, I largely go unscripted. I have a little bit of a guideline that I follow in terms of the topics I want to cover. A lot of the time, my partner Nat joins me as co-host. Today is not one of those days. Yeah, we just kind of fly by the seat of our pants, and sometimes I lose track of what I'm talking about because I just there's so many things I want to say, and I stumble over my own words. And so let's go down the rabbit hole together today and see where we end up. And as always, I love to hear your questions and comments. So, yeah, if you are on the Rough Go page and commenting, if you are on the YouTube stream and commenting, I can see your comments and I will react to them as I see them. So, usually at the top of the show, how I've been sort of doing things is trying to cover like Canadian content. What goes on in American politics, especially these days, has a way of capturing our attention, to say the least. Um, so I end up spending a great deal of time talking about those subjects because I think also what's happening in American politics should serve as a, you know, red flags and warnings to what we as a country may be facing in the future, and what this stuff sort of looks like when you're talking about the sort of protests that are happening in the U.S. and why they're happening. This is, I think, extremely relevant knowledge to us here in Canada. But this one's actually sort of funny. I mean, we know we have a new leader in the Conservative Party in Aaron O'Toole. He is going to be running against Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh for being the Prime Minister of Canada. And he's so far kind of like a nobody. Not a lot of people know who he is. And I think that's been largely the reason why we're not seeing so much pressure from the Conservatives in terms of having an early election. I think they kind of see the writing on the wall there and know what they're going to be facing. And that's they'll lose because people largely don't know who Aaron is. That being a big part of it anyway. A lot of Conservatives in general right now are kind of having a hard time being cast in a good light. Sorry if I keep looking over there. We have a kitten, and she was just climbing all over my guitar cases, and I wanted to make sure she wasn't going to hurt herself or something like that. So yeah, here is, I guess, Aaron O'Toole doing his best to be, relatable to his conservative voter base. Yeah, I'm gonna make that a little bit smaller for you. Yeah, maybe I'll just make it bigger. Here we go. Yeah. What an exhilarating game. Let's do this, Raptors. Like, I too enjoy the sportsing. God, like, could this look like any more staged? Like the nice calm dim lighting in his obviously expensive decor wherever he is. I don't know if he's in his personal property or whatever, but he's certainly, like, if he's just chilling at home, why is he wearing a three-piece suit? And like, yeah, I too enjoy watching the sports scene, relaxing at home, fully dressed in a suit when no one else is there. Very relatable, Mr. O'Toole. And yeah, it might sound a little bit cliched, but yeah, I think leaning into sports is largely a conservative thing to do. It's a trendy conservative thing to do. I think the majority. Oh, there's the kitty in the background. You can sort of see her swinging at the bathrobe in the background there. What are you doing, baby girl? You want to say hello to the kitty? We might as well. Hey. This is Marmite. She is adorable. She's my baby. Yeah. What are you doing? You gonna be my co-host today? Yeah. Oh, she's very much in baby mode right now. She's not. Yeah, that's how you win at YouTube, folks. Is you get a cat, a little cat, and then pet them on the show. You want to eat my fingers? All right, I release you. All right, she's going to wrestle with a piece of tissue paper here. Well, I'm going to try and ignore her. Okay, so yeah, that was literally all I had to say about Aaron O'Toole. I just saw that tweet and thought, like, this is like typical, like, really robotic reaching out to the people stuff. And that's what blows my mind about, like, a lot of Canadian discourse is that, is that, yeah, like we kind of like praise like no conservative is going to say anything about this guy. And how weird this photo kind of is in terms of a public PR photo op sort of thing. I doubt a lot of conservatives are going to talk smack here. But literally anything Justin Trudeau does is like, yeah, you could literally just put Justin's head on this photo, have the same caption, but coming from his Twitter account, right? And the number of conservatives that would be talking smack, like maybe even saying some of the same things I'm pointing out. Like, oh, yeah, I like to watch sports in my suit, too. But it's like, one of the things I find in that, like, in both the United States, here, just a moment. Hey, get down from there. Of all the cables she wants to jump on, it's the power cable's plugged into the wall, and she's literally yanking on them with her paws. She could unplug the computer. I don't know if she's strong enough to do that, but I don't want to risk it. All right, I think she's given up on that. Good Lord. Kittens are chaos, ladies and gentlemen. Chaos. Like, it's just yanking on the fucking outlet. Amazing. But yeah, like the levels of hypocrisy that happen here, and I think a uniting force in. Oh my God, she's doing it again. Just bear with me 1 second. And that was the first time she's ever done anything like that. Oh my God, amazing! Love that kitten so much, but Jesus, what a terror. Uh, thank you for putting up with that. Oh my God, that was funny. Okay, so yeah, it like in one of the things that I find unites conservative ideology both in Canada and the United States is the idea of liberal hypocrisy. It's very potent amongst right wing thinkers. I find like the idea that largely liberals want to appear like virtue signaling, as they love to say, as one of the more modern phrases. But like, yeah, they like to say things like, "I want to take care of the poor. I want to, do better for social programs and all those things." Generally, kind of more liberal leaning sort of ideas, right? And then if at any time they behave in almost any degree that seems counter to that, whether it actually be counter to that or not, if they behave with like nepotism and the type of corruption that you would see from people who are greedy as they're presenting these ideas that are ostensibly the opposite of greedy. There's something that conservatives and right-wingers alike love by just jumping on that and going, say, aha, you're not as good as you say. You talk all these nice things, but at the end of the day, the truth is, you're just a scumbag like the rest of us. And that's why I prefer my scumbags to look Obviously scumbaggy. Now that's a face I can trust. This seems to be like the general sort of thinking amongst conservatives and what drives a lot of anti-liberal ideology. I don't think so much conservative ideology. I think a lot of people that vote conservative, particularly in Canada, might have a lot of liberal ideology, but it might or liberal ideals and thinking and experiences. They might, if you just listed off policy to them, agree with more liberal policy than it seems. But I think the anti-liberal sentiment driven by this sense of hypocrisy that anybody who says they want to legitimately do good and socially beneficial things is automatically can't be as good as they say. And they're lying, and they're going to betray you, and they're going to betray your sense of trust. And they're just going to be another politician, and all politicians are bad. I find people who also say that both sides are bad, all politicians are bad. These are the same people that also, in my personal experience at least, generally lean conservative. I think there's a lot of people on the left who do that too, but nonetheless, I feel like it is a pathway towards anti-liberal thought, right? Because, liberalism, as much as it has been leaning more and more to the right, is still very much the status quo. So that's my little rant on that. The anti-liberal sentiment drives a lot of conservative sentiment in this country. Not so much that they're actually believing in the ongoing ideas of conservatism, because for the most part, they're counter to our interests. And I say our in the sense of working class. Anybody who isn't, the high echelons of income in this country. It's unfortunately not being pro something, but more, anti what makes you uncomfortable or what makes you have a sense of distrust. So that's really unfortunate, I think. But also at the same time, if we recognize that and treat it appropriately, we can make better progress. We can understand each other better and reach out to these people who might be able to be swayed. Like I'm finding right now, radicalizing liberals is easier than ever. I wouldn't give up on them. Like I saw a thing, actually here, I'll put it up on the screen. Recent tweet that I shared. Come on. Yeah, well, I can't find it. That was just a spur of the moment thing I was thinking of showing you anyway. It wasn't actually part of my programming here. So moving on to other Canadian stories. Here's one on CTV News. Ontario teachers post photos exposing reality province's back-to-school plan. Lo and behold, this isn't going well. It's going to be a bit of a disaster. And thusly, we'll get to this next story as titled. You can see here with a picture of Doug Ford. Here's why Ontario's pausing on reopening. Crackly and robotic again, eh? Okay. That is really annoying. All right, I'm going to fix that. Somehow. Let's see if I can fix it without stopping the stream. All right, let me know if that did anything. Yeah, that's what triggered it last time was when I put a picture in picture up, but that shouldn't have like anything to do with the video, right? Yeah, that doesn't like that that image. Oh, that image doesn't have. It's better. Did I fix it? Let me know. Let me know because if that's oh yes, thank you so much. Literally all I did was just in the audio settings, the little switch that sources the microphone. I just switched it on and off. Um, Weird. What you're hearing is actually to explain the happening that is going on there. It's digital distortion caused by two different clocking rates. There's a certain frame rate that the audio is coming in from on the sound card, and when it hits the software, and if for some reason the software is expecting a different frame rate than what the sound card is sending, it will cause that digital distortion that you heard. But for some reason, it seems to happen randomly, and it's got to be something on the software level because this never happens when I record using any other program. It's just this. Streamlabs is what I'm using to broadcast right now. So I got to figure out what's going on there. I don't quite understand that, especially now that I'm paying Streamlabs money to 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 have some of these features. Um, so yeah, that's weird. Anyway, on with the show. um, yeah, so Ontario teachers are posting photos on social media of their crowded classrooms in an effort to prove that schools in the province are not ready for a safe reopening. Ladies and gentlemen, are we surprised? Uh, like, of course this is going to happen. Every single person foresaw this. And it's so funny that I think it was like back in March, April, somewhere around there, the talk of people going on about how great a job Doug Ford was doing handling this pandemic, just by virtue of him not being a total ass. Like our standards were set so low in regards to how Doug Ford would probably handle something like this. We just expected so bad that him not being that bad registered as good on our clocks. Weird. So, yeah. Of course, now, as a result of how not ready we obviously are, how crowded the hallways are going to be, how many kids there are, just how underprepared for a pandemic in general nationwide we've all been. Like, we've been warned about a pandemic coming around again for a long time, or the potential of one. We've had the knowledge to get ahead of this thing, and we kind of chose not to do it. So it's a very much a multi-layered problem. Doesn't squarely rest on Doug Ford, but Doug Ford thinking that this was a good idea to reopen schools at this time and kind of go ahead with that, even attempting to do it, was so on its face a bad idea. I don't know what else to call that.
CTV's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Colin DeMello's next with the consequences of those numbers. Colin.
Well, the province, Nathan, isn't about to take a step backwards just yet, but the government says they're going to take about 4 weeks to assess the scope of the situation. There are concerns, though, about the impact of COVID-19 spreading in the community and what that could do to the classroom.
So, yeah, like obvious news of the year. Like, what was everybody saying? That, oh yeah, like packing a bunch of kids into the buildings, and having not just kids, obviously adults in the teachers and faculty and administration running the schools, but packing all of these people into these buildings might help spread a disease. No kidding. Sometimes I just hate the news. Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. I just hate the news in how just obvious bad something is, but they're trying not to seem so editorialized or giving too much of an opinion. So it just comes off that they're being and as was discovered, water is wet and 2 + 2 = 4. Important news. That's just how that comes off to me. It's nuts. All right. Speaking of schools, getting on to something that happened in the U.S., and of course, this seems like an unfortunately unique American story. Where was this exactly? Oh, of all places, Colorado. Which is ostensibly a bit of a liberal bastion. I can't say I'm an expert on Colorado and the culture there, but I mean, they were kind of at the forefront of the legal weed, right? So I at least would like to believe that, that they're a little progressive, right? Not just because you're pro-weed, it means that you're necessarily socially progressive, but I would like to think on the Venn diagram there's a lot more crossover than not, So yeah, let's pull up this story. School called the cops on a black 12-year-old for having a toy gun in his own home. Does that sound ridiculous? Well, it gets more ridiculous as you read the details and unpack this thing. A Colorado school called the police on a 12-year-old student last month for allegedly playing with a toy gun during an art class on Zoom. And he had a gun, a toy gun, that was his, in his house. Okay, in Denver, there's more weed shops than coffee shops, and no homeless people, or at least a very low number of homeless people, ostensibly. Jessica comments. Thank you for adding that. That seems about right. Denver seems chill. Again, I'm not I don't know the place. I've never been there. So the kid was suspended for a week and now has a record with the county sheriff's department. I don't want to laugh because this isn't really that funny, but it's just so ridiculous. I can't imagine. You have a toy gun in your own house, and you, as a 12-year-old, and you end up with a criminal record. If that isn't just a clear, loud, ridiculous example of racism, it's as simple as that. It's who else had a toy gun and was 12 years old? Tamir Rice. And he was killed by a police officer. This kid, Tamir, was out in a playground playing around. Something I commonly did when I was 12, by the way, was run around with toy guns that did not look super fake, by the way, and playing with my friends, cops and robbers types of stuff. It's horrifying to think if I were a different skin color, what might have been the result of doing that. So we now have Tamir Rice out of Cleveland. who was murdered, and now this 12-year-old boy out of Colorado who now has a criminal record for being inside his own house doing absolutely nothing illegal or wrong whatsoever. If you want to argue it's wrong that this kid, you know, how would I put it? If you want to argue that it's wrong that this kid had just had a gun in the context of school, you know, sure, you know, it's like, it's kind of akin to, you know, just being not polite, right? It's inappropriate that in the school setting you would have a toy gun. It maybe didn't have anything to do with his art class and he was just, you know, slightly misbehaving. Maybe. Let's go that far as to say that. But that's the worst that could be happening. And he has a criminal record now. That's just bonkers. So let's go on to read as if these details are important given what I just said. There are conflicting accounts of what happened during the class, which was recorded via Zoom video and later recorded with a body camera by the school resource officer assigned to the case. Oh, God. Officer Stephen Paddock said the video of the class, which was recorded by the school, clearly shows the Elliott's son and another boy pointing what appears to be a black handgun at the computer screen and pulling the trigger. Curtis Elliott, however, said that the video only shows his son moving the gun from one side to another, he told the Washington Post. Before Paddock left the Elliott home, he verified that the gun was a toy, he said in the report. The school has declined to answer questions about the incident, but said in a statement posted to Facebook that there were several inaccuracies spreading on social media. There's no excuse for any part of anyone in a position of authority to do what they did to this kid. There's none. Like, again, at most, it was inappropriate and not polite for him to, for that boy to do that. At the most. So the fact that it's appearing, you know, in the Washington Post, in Vice, this kid has a criminal record. You know, this could potentially follow him and damage his potential future education. For what? I mean, if your first instinct is to defend anyone who is in a position of authority in this scenario, you are the definition of a bootlicker. Just nuts. I like that stuff's sickening to me. So, talking about, you know, let's talk about the show for a second, because this is really like the first multi-stream episode and the first episode I'm bringing to YouTube, so I sort of am seeing this as a new beginning. But as I said earlier, it feels like the show is in a perpetual form of beta test, and I don't really have a solid format for it yet. But I'm doing my best. We're figuring this out, and I hope you're having fun along with me while we're doing it. But one of the things I'm hoping to incorporate next is to be able to take calls. I want to, not just be interactive in the sense of you guys commenting and, oh God, I got to deprogram that, by the way. I keep using guys as a gender neutral default, and not everyone cares for that, understandably. So that's something I got to work on. So comrades, I want to hear from you in not just the context of commenting and text, but I would love to be able to have a conversation with you directly, hear your questions and concerns. And one of the things I do welcome is to be challenged by people, especially in this scenario where if we could have a conversation live, going back and forth. Because a lot of the time in your text conversations on the internet, obviously things can be misinterpreted, purposefully misinterpreted. Maybe people aren't using the best words. You know, you can't measure tone and intent as much in a text-based conversation. So when you're arguing on Facebook and Twitter, it can really end up being a whole lot of wasteful nonsense. Okay. So yeah, I hate that story so much. I wonder if there's a way to do a watch party on Facebook. But for something that's streaming on YouTube. I wonder. Another thing, if you want to support the show, there is the Rough Go on Patreon. This show is, of course, the Rough Report, but the main page here on YouTube and Facebook is the name of the music project that kind of started all of this, the Rough Go, which is coming out with new material all the time. If you wish to support this podcast and the Rough Go, you can tip. I believe we have a tip feature on the YouTube channel now, or on the Streamlabs channel. And you can also send money to the PayPal. The PayPal link is available on the Facebook page. Also, if you search The Rough Go on PayPal, if you search The Rough Go on Patreon, we're also there as well. If you want to financially support the show, please do so for those channels. There's going to be excellent benefits posted for you doing that. And then on top of that, if you just want to support the show non-financially and spread the good word, I would love that. If you could share the streams when you see it, if you could share just a link to the channel in general, say what you like about it. This whole thing is kind of in its infancy, and I would love to see it grow and react to what you guys like and don't like, and do the best job I can at making the best show I can. So onwards. Another link from Vice. Vice isn't necessarily my favorite blog / kind of conglomerate, amalgamated, whatever news source. But a lot of the time they don't annoy me with like subscription pop-ups and stuff like that. So, take it for what you will. But one of the things I do enjoy about Vice Threads is like Vice Threads, specifically the threads. I mean, like, on Facebook when Vice posts a story, you can be rest assured the vast majority of that comment section is going to be full of people that really, really hate Vice, and they think they're making like awesome jokes. And it's like, mind you, sometimes they do make good jokes. But most of the time it's just the same like tired, cliched stuff that they're just trying to fill the threads with. But obviously it's all kind of like, anti-progressive, very easily upset people. I mean, like, progressive people can be easily upset when you challenge their desire for progress, because all they really want to do is help people. So of course that feels inherently insulting. But it's snowflake conservatives that really bother me, because it's like, what are you upset about? You're just yourself and your ability to not have to monitor your own behavior. But anyway, here's Mark Zuckerberg. He says conservatives don't rule Facebook. But of course, the data says he's wrong. He likes to claim that it's not that his social network, his company, is not a negative feedback loop for right-wing information and misinformation. Mark Zuckerberg says it's wrong to consider Facebook a right-wing echo chamber driven by conservative voices, but data from his own company shows that that's exactly what Facebook is. Zuckerberg said that there was a meme circulating online that frankly is wrong that says, okay, our algorithm is just trying to find things that are going to enrage people somehow, and that's what we try to actually how our system. All right, just bear with me one moment here. We're going to take a quick break because I want to go to the bathroom. I know you needed that information, and we're going to get a few more people watching and invited and try and get a little more crowd engagement going on. So bear with me just for a couple minutes while we go into break mode here. All right, everybody. Getting back to it. All right. Thank you so much for joining us once again. All right, we're back for the last little stretch of the show here. If you are watching live, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you, your comments and questions, everything like that. Typically in the other half of the show, I try and do, well, this isn't even a half. I think I've gone over the halfway point for the show at this point. But in the last portion of the show, let's say, I like to do stuff that not only, covers the topics that we like to cover, but is a little more kind of like fun and about the ribbing more than the news. So I watched a little bit of this, just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be watching. If you've never heard of Steven Crowder, he's the man responsible for, if you've ever been around the internet and seen this T-shirt, socialism is for figs, apparently. Figs. There's a picture of a fig in the, where the eye, apparently the eye should be. So that's Steven Crowder. He's also the person behind behind this. Sorry, open image in new tab. Oh God, that's a terrible picture. Oh well, this meme. Here, I'll stretch it out for you. The change my mind meme. Sorry, I'm getting the pings you're hearing from the messages I'm getting. Yeah, that's Steven Crowder. Oh yeah, never mind. All right. So yeah, thank you for the people that are tuning in live and reacting to the message I'm sending you about watching this live. Trying to reach out to as many people as possible. Sorry if I'm being a bit annoying. I'm just so excited about this new project, guys. So again, thank you for joining me on this journey today. All right, so yeah, the Change My Mind guy is Steven Crowder. He hosts a right-wing comedy show. I guess it's supposed to be funny. Yeah. So yeah, that's him right there. Well, not him. That's obviously like his work, so to speak. He likes to wear the shirt a lot on the air, and then, of course, claims that it can't possibly be homophobic. There's no suggestion or insinuation of a homophobic slur here, apparently. So this is the basis of humor of the man that we're talking about, right? So one of the things he likes to do as a man, here, like actually speaking of as a man, let's find out how old this man is. How old is Steven Crowder? He's 33. So he's a year younger than myself, but he's very much a man, very much beyond his college years, if you will. But one of the things he loves to do is it shows up And there he is with his one of his change my mind things. Socialism is evil. Change my mind. Yeah, he loves to like sit here and do these events at colleges and try and take on college kids. And that's pretty much the exclusive amount of people that he likes to really try and debate, because I don't think he knows anything much beyond. In fact, I would say he knows obviously a lot less than most college kids do. So I would like to go down this rabbit hole with you, but we'll get to that in just a minute. There's another story I wanted to cover. This is actually a really good article. I suggest you reading it. It's in The Conversation, as in theconversation.com. Is cultural Marxism really taking over our universities? I crunched some numbers to find out. Who is the author here? Written by somebody named Matthew Sharp. He's an associate professor of philosophy in Deakin University from, I believe, Australia. From a lot of the things he says in this article, I can only think that he is from Australia. Yeah. So let's see here. Yeah, this is a good article because cultural Marxism is this phrase that, and he explains it very well in here, but to just kind of give you the overview and why I'm bringing up this subject. It's a phrase that's been highly successfully used by propagandists on the right to get people to mistrust the concepts within culture that seek to be moral and virtuous, in terms of human rights and things like that. I think this is very much, despite if it was meant to start as good intentions, a good phrase, something that was, no matter that at all, this is kind of how it's been used and what it's become. Like, it's been most popularized by Jordan Peterson. He started talking about cultural Marxism and the problems with it a lot on his rise to fame, when he was under scrutiny for challenging the idea that, referring to somebody as their gender pronouns or having to refer to somebody as their, quote unquote preferred or actual gender pronouns was somehow infringing on his freedom of speech, and that this was being perpetuated by the concept and ideology of cultural Marxism. And it's just, obviously it's absurd. But there's a lot of people that believe it, because I think in the context of saying or thinking things that are sexist, homophobic, racist, classist, generally speaking, people who are of a little more progressive and liberal or leftist values, generally frown upon this type of bigotry. They're generally agreed that it's pretty bad. I think even a lot of people on the right could be said as they're generally agreed that it's pretty bad. Depending on who you are, of course. But yeah, in terms of, covering the general amounts of people here. So there's this idea that these concepts around like human rights and stuff, like, it must be Marxist. And of course, like, Marxism has this sort of like scare tactic thing attached to it. And yeah, it's just like the Marxists within society trying to create this homogenous culture where if your values deviate from these ideological norms, you're going to be punished for it somehow, i.e., if you don't support trans people, you're breaking the law and going to jail, as according to how Jordan Peterson's extremely obtuse reading of that law went. And how do I know it's an obtuse reading of that law, by the way? Because everything he predicted about that law never happened. And it's been in the books for a good portion now. I think, 6 years? 4 to 6 years, somewhere in that range. Everything he's complaining about. Okay, so apparently my mic is shorting out again. Let me know if that did it. I just did the same thing to correct it as I did the last time. Yeah, I'm going to look into that a bit more and try and solve why that's an ongoing thing. Yeah, so on the question of, is cultural Marxism really taking over universities? No, this is just it's a scare tactic from people that are afraid of progressive values. As a person who believes in these progressive values and supporting, anti-hate legislation, I myself would regard myself in many respects as a Marxist. I'm probably not a Marxist in the same sense that a lot of people would choose to define it, but I would identify as someone who believes or would like to see much of the ideas of Marx enacted in the real world, as especially opposed to more neoliberal or right-wing or fascist ideas, right? So yeah, I'm on that side of the fence. So call me biased in this regard if you will, but as this article I just referenced lays out, it's not true that it's taking over universities. I think it's just purely a reactionary sort of thing where if society makes a little bit of progress in a certain direction, there's got to be this huge backlash against it, and it's rife with irony. Great. I'm glad I found out what a quick fix for that was. Thank you for pointing that out, by the way, Lacey. And later today, I'm going to be doing a filming with Lacey for her podcast. So Artemis Creates. So and I believe that might be attached to the YouTube link that you're commenting at me from, if that's right. Let me know. Okay. So yeah, like this idea that it's something that's taking over our society and searching for this ideological purity that is stifling free speech. It's just obviously bald on its face not true, because as a direct result of like even saying these things, Jordan Peterson got tons of media attention. Anybody who started talking about or complaining about cultural Marxism was receiving all sorts of media hype and attention, and without going too deep into it, because I want to move on to the Steven Crowder thing, it's just obviously used as a scare tactic to get people to be less apprehensive, or to be more apprehensive about getting on board with progressive ideas that they may not necessarily be familiar with in a direct way. So anyway, moving on to the Steven Crowder story. So as I was explaining before about Steven Crowder, he's... here, let's see if I can get a zoom in of this image, because the one I found before was so small. Okay, yeah, there we go. He's this guy, the Change My Mind guy. I believe in the original context of this photograph, it said feminism is cancer, or something like that, or feminism is bad, feminism is evil, change my mind. And he sits there and likes to try and debate college kids because, you know, he'd be obviously intellectually outmatched by anyone who wasn't in the act of learning about this stuff for the most part for the first time. But, like, he's a 33-year-old man trying to debate college kids and make them look silly. Meanwhile, he ends up looking silly a lot of the time. This video being titled, Steven Crowder Gets Blown the F Out by College Student. And that's the Welcome to Society YouTube page I'm referencing this from, by the way. So if you want to see this video in its originality, I'm not going to show the whole thing because, you know, if you want to see the whole thing, you should go to their page. I don't want to rip them off here. But there is a bit of it I want to show. So here's Steven Crowder with yet another one of his stupid signs. Socialism is evil. Sorry, I just want to reference what Lacey's saying here. My show is scheduling to premiere next week on my channel, working on getting it onto audio podcast platforms as well. Yeah, I thought of doing that with the audio because I know a lot of podcasts that do the video thing, you know, go onto audio only platforms as well. So yeah, maybe that's a thing I should consider as well. Thank you, Lacey. But yeah, anyway, here's socialism is evil, he says, Steven Crowder. Again, trying to debate college kids. And, okay, let's go.
We don't want to break the law because we only have one officer who showed up, because that's all you need for a crowd like this. All right, what is your name, sir? Yusuf, nice to meet you. Steven. So I believe, let me explain my position. I believe that socialism is fundamentally evil. And I have this here. We usually don't reference this, but it's sources.
Let me know if my audio is still stable, by the way.
I won't use it. It's not fair for me to use them. So I believe socialism is evil. Right. You disagree. I would love to hear you change my mind.
Okay, well, what's your position on the minimum wage?
Well, hold on a second. This is your changing my mind? I want to make sure.
Yes, I want to get started.
Okay, my position on the minimum wage. Yeah, you know what? I'm not a fan.
So you think there shouldn't be any minimum wage at all?
Yeah, not a fan.
Zero.
Not a fan.
Okay, are you against illegal immigration and legal immigration from poor third world countries at the scale that we've been having it so far?
Am I against illegal immigration? The answer is, what was that? Well, we're going to do everything we can. Like we said, this is last minute because we're not necessarily friendly here. I'm against, no, I mean, they don't consider us friendly. So like I said, we appreciate you supporting us. Of course I'm against illegal immigration. But again, socialism, I believe the idea of socialism, let's do this before we go on, okay? Because this is something, and I think this is important, this is something that we often see from both the right and the left. See, we started with the premise where I made a statement, socialism is evil. Right. And you've moved on to different questions.
Okay, that's about where I wanted to stop it, because I think this, well, like not stop it permanently, we'll keep going a little bit, but that was the first point at which I wanted to pause it, because did you catch what, you know, kind of just happened there?
Okay, because this is something, and I think this is important, this is something, the idea of socialism, let's do this before we go on, okay?
Let's do this before we go on.
I think this is important, this is something that we often see from both the right and the left.
Oh, we see it
we
from
started
both
with the premise where I made a statement, socialism is evil. Right. And you've moved on to different questions.
Yeah, I think this is why, in one of the ways that Steven Crowder can only possibly be good while debating, you know, people who are much younger and perhaps less exposed to education and talking points as him. Because he doesn't seem to fundamentally understand the nature of debate. Like, oh, you've moved on to these different questions. It's like, first of all, when you're talking about minimum wage laws and how that relates to socialism, that's extremely relevant. Steven, you don't see the connection there? You don't see how bringing up minimum wage is essential, well, not necessarily essential, but at least a very good point in the context of talking about socialism? You've moved on to these different things? Oh, boy. And yeah, like, sure, immediately on its face, talking about immigration doesn't seem like it relates to socialism a whole lot. But if you actually know anything about how a lot of socialist countries run or have run in the history of it, the issue of immigration is relevant to how a socialist society might function.
Different topics. So I'd like to first, before we move on, if it's okay, let's define socialism.
Okay.
How do you define socialism? So I know that we're agreeing on that premise.
Socialism is a system in which the state redistributes wealth from what it would be under a pure capitalist system.
Okay, I think we agree on that. Okay, and then I think it's important to but don't boo. This is just an actual discussion. I might be wrong.
You know, that may not necessarily be the most accurate and academic description of socialism, but probably for the sake of this argument, for the sake of following a certain line of reasoning, that's a fair way to describe it. I don't see why people would boo that. Oh yeah, that's absolutely it. He's more interested in trying to get them to stumble over their words and contradict themselves than they are with presenting a good point, right? They want a red herring the good point to get the person to be confused, and it's a tactic that's even worked on me when I've I like to consider myself pretty reasonably good on their feet in a debate. But yeah, there's definitely times a right-wing talker has gotten me to get off the trail and stray from the point that we were trying to get at by virtue of these bad tactics. So yeah, recognizing them is important, Lacey. Yeah. But I have a feeling, just based on how this video was titled, that Yusuf is going to handle himself pretty well against Crowder here.
And what do you think I mean by evil? Or what would we both agree the definition of evil is?
Harmful to society.
Not necessarily to society. I believe morally reprehensible. It's immoral, okay? So
what is evil? He's trying, like, this kid puts it in a very good sort of like material context, right? It's not good for society. It is unhealthy for people. It is a net negative in terms of society, right? That's a bit more of a solid answer than Steven Crowder now attempting to identify it as just what is immoral. Because as we all know, that can be extremely subjective, right? So this kid is already, in just a few short exchanges, been more reasonable than Steven Crowder.
As we both agreed, socialism is basically a governmental control of the distribution or means of distribution or production. And when I...
That's not... totally controlling the means of production would be more communist than socialist. There is a difference, but whatever.
Say evil, I mean, I believe that is immoral. So
Okay.
can we both agree with that?
I don't agree that it's evil.
No, but we agree that that's what I'm saying. That's my position.
Yes.
Okay, so what part of my position do you disagree with? Again, the goal here is to change my mind, not score points.
Well, I'm trying to convince you that your own objectives, if you're a conservative, cannot be achieved under capitalism.
Okay.
And so I'll give you an example of that.
Yeah.
You have a lot of Republicans like Paul Ryan who are obstructing Donald Trump. Well, hold on. You cannot deny that he is a big capitalist, and he has lots of capitalist donors that would like nothing more than to increase their profits. I think you can agree with that. And people like that have been opposing immigration reform for decades because they believe that mass immigration will lower the wages of the working class and increase their profits. Now,
I would say a lot of what you just said is correct.
Okay.
In that many conservatives, Republicans, believe that mass immigration from countries like, say, Mexico, from quote-unquote third world countries, could lower the wages. Yeah, I do believe that a lot of Republicans believe that. Okay, so I would agree with you on that.
So if you impose a minimum wage, you're not going to have this mass immigration coming in, because the companies that are taking these illegal immigrants and taking these low-wage immigrants, if they had to pay them $15 an hour, we wouldn't have mass immigration like we're having
This
right now.
kid's good.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that I agree with that premise. So let me kind of go, because first off, before I would like to take that, hold it. What example would we point to before we go on? Because I know a lot of times we disagree, of a successful socialist country.
There it is. There's another example of him. Oh, can we put a pin in that for a second? And I want to divert over to this for a minute. That's a bit of a red herring. He's trying to throw the kid off.
Well, there are different kinds of socialism. I think you're thinking of the Soviet Union and Venezuela when you say these are unsuccessful countries. But you also have Sweden, you have Norway, you have Finland, you have Denmark, you have Germany.
Sure.
These are countries that have robust economies and high levels of socialization.
Right. What's their minimum wage?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head.
What if I told you that they have no minimum wage?
There are plenty of countries that have high minimum wage. Australia has a high minimum wage.
I know, but we didn't talk about them. We talked about a successful socialist economies. Now, first off, I think it's interesting. This is important because we need to define the premise. First off, we're away from the premise, which is the moral argument. I believe socialism is immoral. The redistribution.
But again, like, it's convenient to say immoral. Yeah, do you see him moving the goalposts here? He's really trying to shift the ground from underneath his opponent, and I don't think it's going to work well.
Distribution of something that you have not earned, I believe, is fundamentally immoral. I believe that's theft.
Are you an anarchist?
Hold on a second. Then we'll go in. So now we moved on from that to the pragmatic. And no, I'm not an anarchist. And then you brought up successful examples in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, I believe.
Yeah.
First off, these aren't socialist countries. Now, the reason we would point to countries like, say, Venezuela or Cuba, for the same reason Bernie Sanders did for decades, is because they're true examples of socialism. The Danish Prime Minister said, Bernie, stop referring to us as a socialist economy. We're a free market economy. They don't have a minimum wage as we know it. They only allow collective bargaining between unions, higher skilled unions, and their employers. So these are countries, by the way, if we want to get into their immigration laws, the only way to make it work, if you refer to those countries, I mean, I guess I would have to ask, it sounds almost as though you're making an argument. Are you a nationalist?
I would say I'm an economic nationalist.
You are an economic nationalist?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So you part ways with a lot of probably your more left-leaning brethren.
I never said I was a liberal.
Okay, so you're a conservative socialist. They're hard to come by.
I like how the kid just like remains straight-faced, like he's not gonna like totally show his hand to Steven Crowder here and give him information that Crowder can try and use to straw man him or something like that. I think this kid is pretty aware of what he's doing here, and I like it.
So no minimum wage there. But again, this doesn't change the idea. Let's get to the fundamental premise.
Again, this is actually, I want to look that up. I'm going to look that up really quick. Okay. None of the Nordic countries has a statutory minimum wage. Denmark and Sweden use collective agreements as their only mechanisms for setting minimum wages, while Finland, Iceland, and Norway have also started to use extension mechanisms to cover all workers at industry level. Now, using collective bargaining, though, is still very much a socialist idea. Steven Crowder. So I don't see, does he think that's a gotcha? I'll be interested to see how that goes. But, yeah. Anyway, let's go back to this.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the pragmatic, and I'd be happy to, but I believe that socialism, the ism that we both agreed upon, the collective means, seizing of distribution, production, is immoral.
I mean, the argument is absurd because if you say that it's immoral, then you also have to say that government funding of police is immoral, government funding of the military is immoral. Anything the government does is immoral, and that's ridiculous because you have to have some state that's going to socialize certain things. And so the question is not, do we have socialization? It's how much.
Sure. I would disagree with that. Now, would you know where I disagree with that? Guess what I'm going to say.
I assume you're going to try to argue that government funding of the military and police is not socialism.
Why would I say that?
Well, because if you don't argue that, then you're going to have to give some ground on socialism.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. If I have to concede that police force, as he's saying, police force, military, roads is socialism, the same as healthcare, education, and I'm assuming that's why you're referring to Denmark and Sweden. They're not socialist economies, but they have more of a social safety net. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, they're social democracies.
They're market economies with higher emphasis on a social safety net. That's how they describe it.
That's what a social democracy is.
So okay, we agree on the term. Let's go with social economies, but they have more of a social safety net. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, they're social democracies.
They're market economies with higher emphasis on a social safety net. That's how they describe it.
That's what a social democracy is.
Okay, we agree on the term. Let's go with social democracy. I just want to make sure we don't get confused.
We agree on the term. That is the term. There's like that. That's like agreeing that 4 means this many. You know. Yeah, we agree on those terms. Okay, Stephen Crowder.
But we just talked about this, conceding that ground. Yeah. I don't believe that the military and the police force would be the same as socialized healthcare school.
Why not?
Sorry, because we only have one microphone. We had to do a late setup. I appreciate you working with me.
Well, I mean...
Why not? Why not was your question.
Our definition was that...
So why not?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure you don't... why not? Because there's a difference between a public good and a commodity. Can you explain to me the difference between public goods and a commodity?
Well, in economics, a public good is a good that is, I believe, non-excludable and non-rivalrous. So...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that would include things like the police, the military. You'd be hard-pressed to even find hardcore libertarians to say that we don't need those. Okay. So there's a big difference. There's a fundamental difference between that and something like healthcare or school.
It's still
or it goes to free internet, as Sven Computer talked about in Germany now. High-speed internet is a right. The second you declare any commodity to be a right or to be a fundamental role of government, that means the government can now remove that right depending on who's in power, and that's the problem. That's why I think it's fundamentally immoral for someone to take something they haven't earned, regardless of who's in power. I think it's immoral for Donald Trump's administration to take it from you, just as you probably think it's immoral for Barack Obama's administration to take it from me. So the difference there would be, first, public goods versus commodity. And I think that's an important distinction for everyone here to make, because it's a common argument we hear from the...
I don't know if this kid is going to argue this point, but what I would present in relation to that is a public good or a commodity does become a public good after a certain point, right? Once it becomes status quo to a society, and it becomes accessible and expedient and a standard for day-to-day life. Say like having a cell phone, having even a landline, if you want to go that far. If you want to have a society that increases its overall benefits to the people, advances its technologies, and, just gets faster and better at getting faster and better, it is necessary to eventually regard commodity as public good. That would be my line of argument anyway.
Left, if you support any role of government at all, that means that this is socialism. But it's not according to the definition that we agreed upon. Something else, I think it also matters the constitutional parameters of government. Right? The Constitution defines what our government is and what fundamental human rights are.
Well, I want to get back to your earlier point where you said that because
it makes me want to divert to a bit of a separate point because, when you're talking about human rights, there's a few different philosophical ways that you can approach that. In terms of like natural law versus man-made law, and what defines morality in philosophical terms. But I think Steven Crowder just sort of accidentally demonstrated in a good way the argument that I often present in line with this is that human rights are political, right? They are not passed down through some sort of, godlike, omniscient moral standard. And I'm not saying that in an idealistic sort of way, like, oh, I wish for it to be that way, or I'm defending it being that way. I just think that's the way it is. Human rights are based on what society's standard for what human rights are at that time. If a society believes it is a human right to have regular access to food, they will make sure that they have avenues to do that. If they don't believe it's a human right, they may even put mechanisms that block people from being able to do that. Say, for example, right now, some of the stories I'm reading out of the U.S. and parts of Canada, it's actually a constant thing. People being blocked by law enforcement to feed the homeless. Out of their own goodwill, they want to feed the homeless, and they create these laws that prevent people from being able to do that, right? All right, anyway, let's move on to the next part here. It's the way they're talking, I almost want to put it up to 1.5 speed, but I'm also afraid I'll just start missing a ton of stuff, so...
The military is a public good, therefore it's not socialism. In your definition, you never made any distinction between different types of goods. You just said a socialist economy is one that takes wealth from some people and gives it to others, and that's what financing a public good is.
Well, no, it's not. You talked about redistributing. The redistribution, common means of production or distribution. So if we want to frame that in, I certainly wouldn't say that that's the police. Oh, someone's yelling. Hopefully we're good. So I would not agree with you that the military or police would be socialist. But to move on here, again, let's go to the Danes, Denmark, Norway, Sweden. You pointed to them as successful examples of socialism, because that would be different from your definition of socialism. So now I moved on from the idea that taking something you haven't earned to give to someone else is morally reprehensible, regardless of the reason, because socialism can only be enacted through the threat of violence. That's really what taxes are. At the end of the day, we all agree on that.
Violence is part of life.
Okay, well, I don't believe there should be a part of life for someone with guns to come in if I don't pay for Timmy's health care. I just disagree with that.
If you don't pay tax...
I'm sure... Oh, okay. I was about to say what I'm sure this kid is about to say. I like you, Youssef. You're good.
You're going to have other forms of violence that arise spontaneously. This sort of autistic libertarian idea of, oh, you can have a non-aggression...
Stop it. He's been watching Matt Damon videos. Continue.
This idea of a...
Did that kid just say what I think he... Autistic idea? Did I hear that right? What did he mean by that? All right. We'll let that one slide. Huh.
Non-aggression principle is just fantasy. Okay, you have to have.
Describe to me. You just said autistic, and this was very civil until you brought that up.
Oh, okay.
Define autistic here.
Well, it tends to be characterized by an overemphasis on logic and philosophy as opposed to reality. You know, it's very easy to argue from syllogisms and...
Okay. Like okay, I get what he was saying, but he probably shouldn't use it like that. Yeah, autistic libertarian. I think he was meant like, just as he said it, he was defining in that context autistic as the overemphasis on logical thinking.
And axioms and all that.
So hold on a second, I want to make sure, before you move, because now what you do is you speak in these paragraphs. We need to determine what these definitions are. I think we both agree that's fair.
Fine.
Okay, so you just said that autism, if I'm not mistaken,
and see, that's the problem with it. The biggest problem with that kid using that term in that way Because again, if there's nothing that a conservative idiot loves more is than even the slightest whiff of liberal hypocrisy, or somebody who might be arguing for the left and having some sort of hypocritical thing. Because if you believe in human rights and you believe in supporting the neurodivergent and you believe in supporting the disabled and the people who are, just differently abled in all sorts of means, whether they be physical, mental, or economic, then, to say something like this and to use a word that way and to sound edgy, Steven Crowder and people like him eat that shit up, and he's going to use it to derail this argument.
I would love for you to bring this up, is rooted more in philosophy and theology than facts, than logic or reason?
Logic, syllogisms, that sort of thing.
That's what you believe is the definition of autism?
Well, because it leads you down these intellectual...
No, do you believe that's the definition of autism?
No,
I'm
using
don't.
it in an informal way.
Okay, so you're using it in an insulting way.
You could say that.
Okay.
A little bit of banter.
A little bit of, yeah. Well, we don't call that friendly banter generally.
Okay.
We call that being a dick.
Really? Call that being a dick. Need I remind you, he's calling that being a dick, coming from the guy that, who wears this shirt on his show and sells this shirt on his website. He's a real great arbiter of who's a dick, right? God. Okay.
So I want to go back to hopefully keeping it civil. I wouldn't call you retarded. I wouldn't say that you had a fight with the Clippers and the Clippers won. I wouldn't do this. Let's keep this very civil. So let's go back to Sweden, Denmark, Norway as examples.
What a really
you
tired
pointed to
insult.
them as successful examples of socialism. It was interesting to me that you said, I know you'd want to point to the USSR or Venezuela or these places, but really we should look to these Scandinavian countries.
Sure.
Why?
Because they provide a good quality of life for their citizens. You don't have this gigantic gap between the working class and the upper class. There is a commitment of the state to the well-being of their citizens, and I think that's a wonderful thing.
Okay. So first off, I agree with you that first off, the overall well-being of citizens is a tremendous thing. I think we would all want. I think everyone here wants a better society, wants a better America. I don't think that you want a worse America. No. I hope that you don't believe I want a worse America, despite the fact that you implied I might be autistic. So maybe I don't know what's best for America. Autistic and such. Keep your hate speech off this campus. But your reasoning there, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said there isn't the same kind of gap, the inequality gap. That was I want to get, because you speak in, like I said, in longer paragraphs. Sure. Seems the fundamental premise there was Denmark, Norway, Sweden, they're examples because they're successful. They have a higher quality of living, and the main the main justification used was there's less of an inequality gap. Am I correct? I don't want to misrepresent you.
Yes.
Okay. So your problem is with inequality.
It's one of several problems. I think another problem when
But that was your first issue. Let's go point by point. Okay.
Fair enough.
Inequality. What's immoral about inequality?
Because there's this idea that you're going to have this society and everybody has social obligations. But if you have a situation where people are being crushed, where people's wages are going down, you lose the social cohesiveness of that society. You lose the commitment that everybody has to advancing that society.
Hold on a second. I want to, because now you're getting into potential results, the hypothetical, almost autistic one could say.
It's real.
But I ask again, what is immoral about inequality?
What's immoral is that it ruins the society. That's what's immoral about it.
How does inequality ruin society? Because it sounds to me, if I'm not mistaken, what you just went down and described was a problem with poverty.
Yeah.
So your problem is with poverty then?
But poverty is a consequence of inequality.
That's not necessarily true. But, and as a matter of fact, I would argue that there are two very different things. Because I would say, and I think we'd probably have to agree, that the free enterprise, westernized capitalist system has pulled more people out of poverty than any system in existence. And if you look at countries, you said don't point to countries like Venezuela.
In what context did they pull more people out of poverty? The poverty rate in China is lower than it is in the United States by about 10%, I think, the last time I looked into that statistic. So, like, in exactly what context is he talking about? Right? Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is Steven Crowder is completely intellectually dishonest. Like, him trying to say who's being a dick in their language. He just does not have a single moral leg to stand on in that field. I'm responding to Lacey's comment for those other people watching. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he opened up those floodgates. Yusuf fucked up there. He did not. He should have been a little more careful with what he was doing.
Or true socialist economies, there's tremendous equality, but everyone is equally poor. So the problem you have is with poverty, it sounds like, and I think we would both have a problem with that we want to solve ways to eliminate as much poverty as possible.
It's not just poverty. Inequality matters too, because if you have inequality of wealth, you're going to have an upper class that controls the political system and secures its own interests instead of the interests of the people.
Okay.
So yes, inequality matters as well.
Okay, so describe to me, and I'd like to go back to that, examples of this, the upper ruling class determining the political system.
Do you want examples of that?
I would like some examples of that.
Sure.
Because I believe, so for example, let's say, you mentioned that inequality hurts people. I would argue no, and I think that's because, again, this is more of a leftist view. I know you said you're not really liberal, but I can tell you by your worldview in economics that you do lean more left because you're seeing it as a zero-sum game. Wealthy people can't get wealthy off of the backs of poor people if they make them more poor. That's kind of, if we're going to talk about motives and attributing motives, which you've done a couple of times here, if I believe if I want everyone to be wealthy,
okay,
I would necessarily, if I need a system of government that would want people to be wealthy, would require people to be wealthy. For someone who would want to control a system of government like in socialist economies, who would want to consistently talk or gain the votes of the poor, they could only be elected if people are poor. Bernie Sanders is not going to be elected by a rich country.
We're not trying to make everybody rich. That's not possible. We're trying to create a fair distribution of wealth. But I want to get back to your earlier question about how are the...
That didn't follow a consistent line of reasoning whatsoever. That was just kind of like a jumble of trying to find some sort of point of hypocrisy there. Again, saying like, it's within the leftist interest to keep people poor because otherwise who will vote for them? And it's just like, that is so sunk in a false premise. Wild.
The wealthy controlling the political
Well, yeah, so let's, an example of that, I don't believe that inequality necessarily hurts someone. I don't believe it's a zero-sum game. For example, Tim Cook, and I don't like Tim Cook, by the way. I know Apple people, Android, they're going to start yelling. Tim Cook creating a better iPhone, even though the iPhone 10 kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's where we get the passion. That doesn't hurt me. Him making billions of dollars, that doesn't hurt me.
Somebody unironically has a Gadsden flag in the background there.
Poverty, bread lines, $160 for a dozen eggs. That hurts me. I have a problem with poverty. I don't care if someone else has more than me, so long as I have a system where I'm able to do okay.
Do you understand that it's the upper class and the capitalists that want mass immigration and want illegal immigration because it's in their economic self-interest? If you're a Republican and you're with the capitalists, you're going against your own interests. The capitalists are not conservative. They're not.
Well, hold on a second. We're talking about capitalist, conservative, Republican here. So you're saying that capitalism, we're talking about the ism now, socialism versus capitalism. Yeah. I don't care what Paul Ryan does in his own time. I don't care what his front page news press is doing P90X and what he thinks about immigration. I couldn't care less.
So what
I don't believe in it. I don't believe. It seems that you would agree in securing the borders. It seems that you would agree in stricter immigration laws.
I would, and it's not. You're not going to get it if you shill for the capitalists.
Well,
they're against you.
Define shill.
Well, if you're
I know you like to sound really intelligent by speaking in paragraphs. One thing, you've misused words several times. And if someone were to call you on it and be as rude as you are, you might look what you might refer.
See, the sheer level, the intellectual dishonesty just oozing off of Crowder here.
To as stupid.
Okay.
So saying autistic or shill, define, because it's a very specific definition. You came in and just said shill.
All right.
And I'm really
Let's
quickly
let this go.
ready to give the microphone to someone else if you don't stop doing this, because this isn't the goal of this. What's a shill?
Well, I think you're getting upset because you're losing the debate. But
that's fair. That's fair.
I think that's part of it.
No. The person losing the debate is the one who refers to the other person as autistic and a shill. That's generally a good sign. So what's a shill?
I don't have the exact definition, but essentially someone who's, I guess, pushing or advancing somebody else's interests, I suppose.
For profit.
Yes.
Fair enough. But a lot of these
Yes.
conservatives who...
Well, you're not talking to these conservatives,
Yes.
you're talking to me. This isn't,
Okay.
this isn't a performance
Yes.
call here. That's why we're doing this out here. This is a conversation. You're talking to me. I just said that I'm against illegal immigration. It's okay, you can look
This
at me now.
isn't
I'm
a
not mad at you.
performance.
I
That's
just-
why
I
we're
just think it's
doing
rude.
this out
It's
here
okay,
in
don't
front of
worry.
an
It's-
audience.
We're okay. I'm used to people being rude to me. I'm sure you're
Like
probably
this isn't
aware
a
of this to
performance.
one degree or another. Let's move back to, again, Norway, Sweden. We didn't really kind of go to that. You've talked about them as successful examples. Now, we refer to them, and I would agree. I would agree that if we're going to take a model and say they've created a social safety net that functions better than many other countries, for example, socialized healthcare and education.
yeah, what's wrong with that?
Good. Well, like, so you would support school vouchers.
I think, in general, vouchers, I think, have a problem because they do lead to the incentivization of private schools. But
Okay.
any way that the
Well,
government
that's
can...
I just say 'cause
They do lead to it. They are the incentivization of private schools.
that's what Sweden does.
Yes.
So you would support more of a flat tax and increasing taxes on the middle class and the lower class.
I want a progressive tax.
Okay. Well, that's not what happens in Denmark.
They should change it.
Okay. So you would want a lower corporate tax rate.
Not necessarily.
Okay. So here's the one thing we point to, and I appreciate you taking. What was your name again?
Yusuf.
Yusuf. I appreciate Yusuf taking the time. Everyone, give a hand to Yusuf. Appreciate it very much.
Yeah, like Steven Crowder basically spent that entire time trying to just get that kid off track. That's what was obvious to me. So yeah, I don't know. People should be more aware of these figures on the internet, I think, because more people than you realize listen to them. More people than you realize would defend their ideas, despite the fact that they're objectively fallacious, false, immoral, as I would define it in the context of being a net negative on the well-being of most people in society. Yeah, that's... And they love to put this, like, socialism in the context of socialism is just... everyone is just equally poor and equally miserable. And it's like, I don't know, people having access to homes is miserable. You don't have to worry about where you live. That's miserable. I don't know. Seems like a pretty, I like these lazy forms of argument, like just these like weird bumper sticker philosophy talking points. Yeah, exactly. Like even people that listen to a lot of podcasts that I like, I think I would argue listen to Joe Rogan too much. As Lacey commenting that, the algorithm funnels people to like, these right-wing figures like Crowder, Shapiro, and then the, kind of more diet figures like Joe Rogan. Yeah, Joe Rogan is a mixed bag, he's not necessarily inherently good or inherently evil in any way. I just think his overall presence, he has a tendency to cater to right-wing frames of thought far too much. I think is how I would choose to explain that, perhaps. So yeah, anyway, let's cap off the show. I've been going on for nearly 2 hours, and normally I try and keep this show to 1 hour. But yeah, it is what it is. We were having fun. We got into a bit of a video there. So thank you for sticking around, Lacey, in particular. You've been watching this whole time, I believe. I'll be looking forward to doing the taping with you later. So yeah, the end point of the show we like to call nuts and bolts. It's a concept that Nat came up with. So nuts and bolts is basically where we take a moment to talk about what we're doing to help each other in our immediate communities. Talking about cultural Marxism. I guess in a way, if you wanted to name somebody who is a cultural Marxist, name me. I'll take that title because I believe, as I've explained before, if you want to see a grand mass political movement moving to the left that is genuinely to the benefit of most people, we have to experience a cultural shift first. And that means recognizing that certain status quo aspects of our society, how we treat each other, talk about each other, label each other, define each other, define each other's value, and how that relates to each person. A lot of that, I think, we have been indoctrinated to see in toxic ways, in the sense of, in a way that Marx wrote, all human interaction becomes commodified, and it's nothing more than a business exchange and less a meaningful experience between two human beings. That sort of thing. And I think we need to find ourselves again in the sense of finding this sense of community. And I think one of the ways we can do that and exercise that and ultimately become a better society, better people, and move forward in a myriad of ways. I think one of the best ways we can do that is, just asking, what have you done for your neighbors? What have you done for the people in your community? Have you reached out to them? Have you talked to them? For example, Nat here, she likes to, if anybody is particularly, elderly and needs help, getting groceries and certain day-to-day things like this, reaching out to those people and improving their lives in these small ways. I think it's very noble to do, on top of the fact that, it will ultimately make us better people in a better culture. And so it's the nuts and bolts of society. Reach out to the people around you. Don't be isolated from them. I can say most of my life, I don't think I have ever gotten to know neighbors enough. You know what I mean? Just getting on a common ground with people and realizing that we are codependent at the end of the day. No person is an island. No person can just win and collect resources without it being to the detriment of somebody else. And yes, as Stephen Crowder said it there in terms of frames of leftist thought, I do see this as a zero-sum game. In terms of the economy, for things to have, for certain things to have value, and then thusly for certain things to have less value, that's the way it has to work. It is a zero-sum game. Of course it is. The YouTube stream died halfway through what? Oh, I think maybe there's a time limit on the YouTube stream. Died halfway through your comment, or were you just talking to me through YouTube the whole time? I don't understand, sorry. But anyway, we're just learning, and that essentially caps off the end of the show anyhow. So I do appreciate everybody who watched and engaged, and I think it was a lot of fun, and I hope to do this more in the future. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe I'll continue to do this as close to the noon hour as possible. Maybe the evening works a lot better for others. Anyway, this is... gotta have the theme music going out. This is Jimmy Ruffian signing off for the Rough Report, and stay tuned to the pages for more news regarding the music stuff from the Rough Go. Lots of news coming up there. Once again, thank you so much.